It wasn't just a movie. It was more than a movie. When you look at that movie, 200,000 soldiers approximately took on the burden because they had the vision that their people would gain something if they did something. So they made the sacrifice. And we have to keep in mind, we did not get where we are on our own. We stand on the shoulders of many, many martyrs, known and unknown. So did I say enough?
It is important to learn about the childhood generations before us because we could find knowledge and information so we could succeed in this life.
I think it's important to learn about the childhood generations before us because I think it's important that like you should learn about your past and learn about how the problems people had before us, and so like we can learn from the mistakes. Like even though things change throughout generations, we still experience some of the same things they experience. So I think it would be easier if you just listen and you won't like make the same mistakes they made.
Hotep, Dr. Baba Aman. My name is Rodney Dyer, and welcome to Sankofa Freedom Academy Charter School.
Ashanti, son.
My question was, what was your childhood like?
Ah, it was pretty good. Came from a two-parent family. My father was a Philadelphia police officer. In fact, he attained the rank of sergeant uh, in the Philadelphia Police Department. My mother worked for the city as a librarian, and she also worked with Smith Kleiner French at that time as a librarian. Had one sibling, a sister, and unfortunately she has joined the ancestors. She joined the ancestors in 2002, and we moved into a integrated neighborhood in West Philadelphia, and at that time it was largely Italian and Polish, but black folks were moving in at a fairly steady pace. We moved here in the early 1950s, and so when we went to school, the schools were integrated. I'm not sure about the percentage, but it was a very large percentage of black students as well as white students. So we had very little problems at that time, even in middle school. In fact, as we progressed through school, the schools became more and more predominantly black, and as white folks kind of moved out to other areas of the city and outside the city.
I grew up in North Philadelphia. Uh, as a matter of fact, I grew up in the heart of North Philadelphia at 33rd and, well, you would say Cecil B. Moore, but it was 33rd in Columbia when I was growing up. Um, I grew up on a little street called Turner Street, and we used to play a lot of sports. We lived right across the street from the park, from Fairmount Park. So we played a lot of football, a ton of baseball. As a matter of fact, I had aspirations of becoming a Major League Baseball player, but that didn't happen. But I was met by tragedy when I was 16. My mother passed away, and it really derailed a lot of my hopes and dreams. It was a life-changing event, but as the spirits would have it, I still was able to manage and navigate life to have some semblance of success today. So I could go on and on with that. Life was a whole lot different when I was growing up than it is now. It was a whole lot simpler. It was easier to navigate. it was a wonderful time. I can say that during the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. It was a wonderful time. So my childhood was a joy.
What was your childhood like?
Not an easy one. Easy question was my childhood like. Well, let me begin by saying that I was born in Portsmouth, Virginia. My sister and I, my mother was born in Portsmouth, Virginia. She wanted her daughters born in the South, and so we were. But by I think the age of 3 or so, we were here in Philadelphia. So I feel I'm connected to Philadelphia in that way. We lived with my grandmother for a little while on North 15th Street, and then on Park Avenue, around 13th Street, and then we moved in 1954 to Raymond Rosen Public Housing. And we were there from about 1954 till about 1960, 61. And then we moved to where I am right now in this very house, 1960, 1961. And we've been here ever since. And in terms of growing up, my mom felt that it was important that her daughters be protected. And so she enrolled us in Catholic school. So my school was St. Elizabeth's, the 23rd, and Burke's, the 23rd Montgomery. And after that K-8 experience, I moved on to John W. Hallahan Catholic Girls High School, which is about to close. It's the oldest Catholic Girls High School in the country, so that's another story. But growing up, I think when I think of my joy, I think of spending summers at my grandma Daisy Wiggins' house in Wildwood, New Jersey. I could be a kid. Okay, I mean, I could run, I could play, I could do all those things that weren't quite what I could do, back in the city, if you will. And if we weren't in Wildwood, then we were in Portsmouth at my godmother's house. So I would say that growing up was interesting. It was rough and tumble. I grew up around the era of gang warfare, and when I begin to see what's going on today, I'm looking at some things that seem similar, and yet some things are very, very different. But I would say that growing up was just, growing up as a kid, just trying to be a kid. There was some really good educational things that happened, and then there were some things that just didn't happen, such as knowing one's history, that type of thing. But I would say that it was pretty cool.
So we had an opportunity, I guess, that sometimes y'all don't have. We could just go outside and play. I mean, we could be children. The community definitely looked out for you. There was nothing that you really could do in the neighborhood that your parents didn't help out, because it definitely was a village. And so anytime you went out or did anything that was reflective on your parents' misdeeds, they knew about it immediately, because the village was always in communication with them. And not really saying, who told, but they knew. Like, it seems my mother, I'd get home from school, my mother would say, I heard you did so-and-so. I'm like, who told you? They'd be like, no, you don't need to know all that. All you need to know is that you're being watched constantly. But it was a beautiful thing. I mean, they could also discipline you physically at points if they saw you doing something wrong, and then take you home for another physical discipline, and depending on the nature of the offense, it was a different type of community. I mean, had some of the similar problems. We had gangs and that type of situations, but it was a sense of community. I mean, I miss that for y'all, that y'all can't be children and you have to be adults, so early in the game, because you're going to be adult for a long time. You need to treasure your childhood.
My mother and father grew up in South Carolina, Liberty Hill and Kershaw, respectively. My mother in Liberty Hill, South Carolina, my father in Kershaw, South Carolina. As I mentioned, I'm the seventh son of 10 children, 8 boys and 2 girls. And I moved with the family in that great migration north in a car when I was like 4 years old, something like that. And so I came over with the family. I probably was in between my young brother, my sister, and my big brothers and all that type of stuff. So I come from a large family. I love every one of them. We have so much blood love for each other. In fact, we was known that you could not mess with the Kirkland family in Washington, D.C. That if you mess with one, you mess with all of them. And Daddy Kirk was the leader. That's my daddy, my father. And so And so and also I was, like I mentioned, I was very adventurous when I was young. Anything that our little hood group would want to do, I could find a way to do it. That's why they called me the kid, the thinker. Then when I was like between 13, 17 years old, I could always find a way to do what we want to do. And if you think it through, you can do it. You can do that. So I did. I showed that. And so that's what my life was about. Then along came, and I was a good pool player, by the way. Let me mention that for all those pool players out there. I was a good pool player when I was in junior high school and high school. That's how I made my lunch money. And so in the movie Dead President, they used that space as a pool room as part of connecting with me. But remember that to get the real story about Dead President, you have to read my story. What you see on the screen is loosely based on my story that's in the book, right?
Yeah.
All right, so my childhood was like just pretty much, I played football, played baseball. I didn't play too much of basketball, but football and baseball I played. I played shortstop when I was a baseball player, and I was quarterback when I was playing football for the boys club in Washington, D.C.
We had a very happy childhood. I can go back to that and start with that. There were four of us. There were two boys and two girls in my family. My older brother has passed, and my younger brother has recently passed. But we grew up in a household that there was very little stress. We learned we didn't have to agree all the time with each other, but we knew how to disagree. There was no fighting. You argue, yes, but there was peace. And I look back to all the wonderful things that we did as a family. Every birthday was a family gathering, each of our birthdays. And that gave us a chance to stay in touch with our family members, older, all ages. Holiday time, the same thing. We always had family gatherings.
It started with my grandparents who were born in 1887, respectively. And they had 7 boys, and they lived on a white person's farm. And they, as when the blacks got their freedom, they didn't have anything. They had to borrow money from the whites to buy their food, to pay their bills. And at the end, when they harvest their crop, they didn't have very few money left. So my grandmother saved up enough money and bought a place of land for her 7 boys. And she had a goal in life. Her freedom came from her determination to give something back to her family. So as a result, my mom and dad, with their 12 children, set goals. They sacrificed and sent their 12 children to college.
My childhood. Well, it's not uncommon. I lived in the country, a rural area, they're calling it now. But at the time, we just thought it was just a complete little village. So I did not know that I lived in a rural area. I learned that later in life. We lived on a farm. My parents, we were not sharecroppers, but we were right next door to sharecroppers. What we did, my family inherited some land. So the land was divided among the brothers, and each brother had a portion to farm. And in addition to that, they rented the land, and we planted, my parents planted tobacco, cotton, corn, peas, cucumbers, watermelons, and all sorts of vegetables. So from an early age, I worked on the farm. Everybody did something. From feeding, when I was 5, I fed the chickens until I was old enough to start working in the farms, which was around about 8. I started, we started by doing what we call handing tobacco And that tobacco was used to make those terrible Camel cigarettes. As a matter of fact, was used to make a lot of cigarettes, but we were handing tobacco, and that tobacco was sold and made into cigarettes. And we also picked cotton. And of course, that cotton was made into fabric, thread, and many other things. The corn was basically for the consumption of the farm animals, and you know, such as the pigs, the cow, the horse or mule. So that's what the corn was used for. And some people use it to make what you all may not know. They use some of it to make illegal corn liquor. Now, that was an illegal drink, and you were always being chased by the police if you were known to make illegal corn liquor. But some people did do it. We didn't. My parents didn't, but you know, it was one of the things that we knew about, but we didn't talk about it.
In those days, you wore your school clothes. We were, you know, girls couldn't wear pants. That didn't happen until high school. And I remember in high school getting in trouble because I would, it was cold out there to wear a dress. And so I would have my pants on and try to run to the bathroom without getting caught. But, you know, growing up, you had your dress clothes, you came home and you changed to something else and went out to play and do your homework. So that was my recall, pretty normal life. And then we moved to West Philadelphia, and so that was about it. I went to church. I remember going to church and school. That was pretty much it. My mother did take me on trips. Let's see, we went to New York. New York, they had the World's Fair. And what else? Oh, we went down to Atlantic City and Wildwood. By the way, that was segregated too.
A form of racism I experienced was when somebody was being tased at the top of the block and it was causing traffic. So my mom wanted to know what was going on, but the white cop kept like pushing her, trying to push her back into the car, cursing at her. But it was a bunch of white people up there watching this man get tased, but my mom couldn't go see what was going on. And I asked this question because it's like, that happened to me at a young age and it really had an impact on my life. And that's kind of the same for other people. So that's why I asked that question.
I experienced racism when I was with my dad and my little brother. And my dad, he used to own a Ford Crown Vic. And for some reason, when a cop sees a black person in the Ford Crown Vic, it's just, they think in their mind there's always something going on. Or especially if you got tinted windows, there's always something suspicious, there's always something going on. And that's not really the case. But he was picking me up from this camp, summer camp, and the police officer had pulled us over. He had pulled us over and he said that this Crown Vic had recently been in a crime. Now, there's more than one blue Ford Crown Vics out there. There's plenty of them. So I was thinking, well, out of all Crown Vics, why would it be this one? He didn't check the license plate. He didn't do anything of that. He just said he saw this on camera last night and that this was the car. So my thing was, well, like I said, there's plenty of Crown Vics in this type of color. So why, like, you didn't thoroughly check, well, was this that car? Like, you didn't check the license plate, you didn't do any of that. And my dad, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink, he doesn't do any of that, especially not around us, not around me and my siblings. So it was just kind of weird that the cop would put him in that how can I put them in that stereotype to say, well, hey, we gotta arrest you because this happened and this car was in that scene, and that's not really the case.
When I was a little younger and I used to go to this other school, and these two girls used to bully me and tell me that I wasn't pretty because I was black. And then I used to go home crying, and I used to always run around saying I was white. And I asked this question because I wanted to know other people's experiences of racism, because it's not a good thing and people don't really want to experience it.
In your childhood, did you or your family ever encounter any direct acts of racism?
We didn't encounter any overt, active racism. I grew up in the Tasker Homes project, which was integrated, well integrated. The school I went to was integrated. However, in surrounding neighborhoods, there were skirmishes and such uncomfortable situations that some of the students and people who lived in all Black neighborhoods, as well as the ones who lived in all white neighborhoods, we were surrounded by such. And there were some conflicts, but my family and I did not have any active, overt actions against us.
Well, growing up in Camden, it was a different time, because during that time, being raised by a single mother, coming up from down south, you kind of knew some of the things that you had to do. What was expected was not expected. So some basically discrimination going into stores, being watched going into stores. We knew what that was about. And the one time that I was confronted about being in a store, I didn't take matters in my own hand. I came home and told my mother. My mother went back and handled it, because we were taught, do not handle ourselves, let the adults handle it. So my mother handled it. And so at that point in time, I started to question, why were we different? Because I was with my sister at the time. Why were we being treated the way we were being treated? That led me to do research and understand parts of my history. And my mother being from down south, she provided information as to why we were treated the way we were treated. So it had a profound impact, and it pushed me to learn more about who I was as a person of color.
Now, I was the first one to go to college. And we lived in a very small rural community. And when I came home one weekend, the state troopers, the Ku Klux Klans, came to our house. And they had on their white hoods and their sheets, and they called my father out. Now, the Klans were known for beating up Black folks. And my dad wanted to, being the man of the house, he wanted to go out and talk to them. And my mom said, no. Well, they went not far from our house, and they burned a cross. And they used microphones, and they were talking about my father sending his peasy-head daughter to college. And I said, oh my goodness, they're talking about me.
You know what? If I did, I didn't even know it. Because in my particular neighborhood where I grew up at, I only remember one white person living on our block, and it was an older white lady, and she got along with everybody pretty much probably because she had to, because she was the only Caucasian person in the neighborhood.
Man, see, I lived in Camden, and it's all Black. It's like Chocolate City, and I lived in the projects. So we initially, my family was po. It's like beans and hot dogs and that, you know, fighting the roaches and all of that, right? But my mom put her foot down. She said, "We're not going to live in this project forever. I need to move to the suburbs." It was good and it was bad. Because when we moved to the suburbs, the white folks wasn't used to us. So they, you know, oh, let's get the chicken eaters and all that. We had a riot in our school because you know how we do. We sit all the black kids sit at one table and we be kicking it. And then the white kids, they like teasing us. So my buddy, she had enough. She turned their tables over. You hear me? And they had to shut the town down. That's how bad it was.
Well, I guess the first time I just had racism when I talked about they desegregated schools and they sent us, the first school was the far, far, far northeast. If you ever been to Franklin Mills, it was way up there. They had not seen a black teacher. And I didn't have a car, and the school was about a mile from the bus stop. And so we would be walking, and the white teachers would drive right past us. And then when we got to this school, they immediately thought we would help, not the teachers.
When I was applying to teach for the School District of Philadelphia, I had just finished this wonderful course in interfacing African and African American literature. It was at Emory University, I'll never forget. So I'm like empowered now because I was just one, like a young teacher, and I was surrounded by all these other folks who were black folks with advanced degrees and so forth. But they were teaching us, they were telling us the things that we could be doing in the classroom. So Miss Jackie Wiggins decides she's going to try this out, and she goes for a job. So the question, I think the question was, number one, you could answer the reading question or the literature question. Well, I didn't take a lot of coursework in reading, just I think one. So I took the literature question. And I was happy about that because I just learned about all these black authors, and I'm like on a roll. And you answer the questions, and then you wait. So if you, at that time, and looking like 1973, if you did okay, you were asked to come to the front of the auditorium, school district. That was the 21st of Parkland. If you didn't do okay, you were asked to leave. So I got called to go to the front. So I'm like nervous, but I said, I guess what I wrote was great. My bad, my mistake. I'll never forget it was a white English teacher who answered the literature question, and a black woman, Miss Willadoon Bain, who, if you answer the reading question, she took, she was going to pose questions. But here's what he did when I went to the front. I hope you can see it just a little bit. He held up my paper like this, as if there was something like on it, and sort of, see, he didn't throw it down, he just sort of put it down in a way that I was like, what does that mean? And then he says, I don't know any of these authors. Who are these authors? Well, I started. I was talking about Margaret Walker and Jubilee. I was talking about Langston Hughes. I was just going. Yeah. And this was 73. And I could tell he was getting more and more red. All right. And then this is where I felt that I fell down. I could feel his exasperation. And he said, well, and I remember he crossed his arms like this. If you had to teach Shakespeare, who would you teach? And if I'd been on my game, I would have said Othello, but I didn't know Othello that well. I knew Macbeth. And I could see like, it was like, gotcha.
Now, well, experiencing the context that I lived it. I lived it through my mother's mother's mother, my father's father's father. My mother's and my father was like born in 1912, wow. So in this country, as a descendant of Africans enslaved in the United States, and they had to struggle They showed me, or I observed them struggling. So in my observation of them, I was able to analyze, conceptualize, and process my role in society.
The racism is real. Now, why you hate us? You know, why do you hate us? Dr. Cress Welsing has a book called the ISIS Papers. And when you get a chance, read that. And she will tell you why they're always after our neck. It's because you're young and gifted and Black.
Yeah, racism equals power plus prejudice, and that comes with a white voice. But I also have to be mindful of sometimes some of our intercultural things that we go through, as Black people, because we have been denied so much.
But again, this is what I'm telling you, a support system. The one teacher that lived in West Philly, her father gave up his car for a week. We drove to school with his car for a week, with his daughter driving. The next week, my mother gave up her car for the week. I drove us up from West Philly to school in the Northeast till we could save up enough money to buy a car. This is what I'm saying to you, that you don't let challenges and racism or what people think of you stop you from achieving your goals.
I believe the significance of the project is like to pass on information to the newer generation from like older people and teach us lessons on how to like handle ourselves and how to better ourselves and just learn from what our elders went through.
Okay, I think the significance of this project was to get us to get knowledge from different people of all walks of life and to let us see different types of achievements, different types of milestones in life, just different things. So like we could have knowledge, we could take it and use it in the future, things like that.
Um, what I believe in the significance of this project is that it can well it gave us a lot of wisdom from my personal experience, hearing the elders, talk about what they went through as a child and what they're going through as adults. It kind of prepared me for the things that they went through, knowing that I might go through it because I'm a Black man in America.
The essential question for our nation, the Ashanti nation, is what is the cost of freedom? How would you answer this question?
Wow. That's a great question. I mean, the cost of freedom is sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice to be free? What are you willing to give up to be free? How committed are you to not see freedom in your lifetime, but to make sure that your children are free and your grandchildren are free? So I would say the main cost of freedom is sacrifice.
What type of sacrifices do you think is necessary to gain freedom?
Well, I'll tell you, some of the people that gained freedom had immense sacrifices. I mean, we just hear about somebody like Harriet Tubman, but there are people that took off on their own, not knowing where they were going or how to get there. They just knew they needed to be free people. And if you were caught, you were sold back into slavery, you were whipped, could lose your toes or some severe punishment. So it was with courage people took off to find freedom.
Well, Frederick Douglass addressed that question in his address to the West Indian Emancipation Speech in 1857. He said, "Let me tell you a word of the philosophy of reform. The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. The conflict has been exciting, agitating, all absorbing, and for the time being, putting all other tumults to silence. It must do this or it must do nothing. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. The struggle has maybe a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both, moral and physical. But it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue until they resist it with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those who they oppress. They may not all men may not always get what they pay for in this world, but they must certainly pay for all that they get. If we ever get free from the oppressions and wrongs heaped upon us, we must pay for these removal. We must do this by labor, by suffering, by sacrifice, and if need be, by our lives and the lives of others. Frederick Douglass said it very, very well. The price of freedom is that and something no less than that. We must pay for that. We must struggle. We must resist. We must resist oppression at all costs, at all points in our lives and other people's lives as well. The sacrifice can never to be too great. Dr. Malana Karenga always teaches us about the divinity of struggle, the divinity of struggle, because that's what we must do.
Yes, freedom has a cost. Look at all the folks that die all the time for freedom. I think that our story is one that is extremely unique with respect to that. But if you look at oppression, universal oppression, when people are seeking their freedom, the freedom to breathe, the freedom to be, the freedom to be creative, the freedom to learn, the freedom to practice whatever you want to practice spiritually. And there are those that say, no, I don't think so. No, and if you even try it, we have something for you. Well, I think that when people say no, one thing that I can say for sure, sometimes you can say some things for sure, but I have learned over time, and I'm 70 years old. I'll be 71 next month. There's a mantra, like a little chant, that when we're, getting ready to do a protest or something, you've heard it before. It's this: the people united will never be defeated. And it sort of rolls like that, okay? But it's so true. But the people united around what is it that you're wanting, what is going to be the cost, will never be defeated. Sometimes, as we have seen this summer, for example, with Black Lives Matter, with the rubber bullets, and who knew that many of them were rubber bullets? Because sometimes things happen and then things get swept under the rug. But I tell you this, the cost will be sometimes death. But when we think about harm, injury, terror, sometimes death will follow, sometimes not. We have to keep those words in mind, because when people want to be free, it's because they've been harmed, they've been injured, they've been terrorized, and they have seen death. So I think that when we talk about freedom, that there is that cost. There is that cost involved. It could be your life, or it could be real change. It could be something that changes. We have people in city council now who fight for people who are going to be evicted. We have people who are fighting for a $15 an hour wage. We have people in Congress now. Some Democrats just yesterday fought hard to keep the $15 an hour wage in this bill that President Biden is going to push through. So what I'm saying is that it may not always end in something death, but sometimes it may end with real change happening to benefit the people. So they won't feel terrorized, so they won't feel injured, so they won't be harmed.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers, sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers, sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be just one and a number as we stand against tyranny. To me, young people come first, they come first. They have the courage where we fail. If I can just shine a light on as they carry us through the gale. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. I'll bow to no man's word. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Come on, sing. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We cannot rest. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We cannot rest. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We cannot rest. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We cannot rest. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We will not rest. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We will not rest. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We will not rest. We who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We will not rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until come on, sing now. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
What steps can we take to unite more as a people?
That's a hard one, Scholar Rodney. Unite more as a people. I think we can love on each other more, be more respectful to each other. Give of your time and service to others. I think that's it. I think the current conditions, we do have everybody has to give, the adults have to give a little more, particularly to the younger generations and the ones that are not fortunate, like the people who have lost jobs and things like that. Now, for example, I can't do but so much. So what I'll do is, like, I'll pick up a box of food and give it to some of the people I know that can't get out. You know, so I'll make a maybe about 5 stops because they don't need a whole lot. Giving out what's in the box of food.
I love the fact that with our restaurant, we were able to go into the community and give second chances to those who had difficulty getting a second chance because they made a wrong decision, and so that kept them from getting a job. So our chef in the restaurant, very good skills, but he was not given an opportunity. So we were able to give him an opportunity as our chef, a second chance. I was also able to reach out to the other high schools at that time who had home ec classes. That's not available anymore, but they could come to the restaurant. Also during the restaurant, I love the fact that our creative arts high school, because we had an environment where we could, in a space that our creative arts high school, we would have jazz on Thursday nights at the restaurant. And on Sunday, we would have our gospel choirs in our schools. So it provided an opportunity to bring in various facets of the community and then show them that you can do it. People say you can't, because one drawback, and I have to say this, with the restaurant, we had to basically fund it on our own. As we went out for funding in the city, certain individuals were given funding. We were not given funding. So a lot of it was self-funding of the restaurant. So here it goes to obstacles. Do not let obstacles stand in your way. If it's something you want to do, push forward.
So that's why Sankofa is so important. You got to love your blackness. If you love your blackness, you're not going to shoot nobody. You're going to sit down, you're going to talk, you work it out. The Dogon don't even have a word for murder or jail in their language or society for thousands of years. They don't have it. They sit down, they let the chief work it out and talk to them. So they don't even have, unheard of. We come here, we locked up, and they making cha-ching, cha-ching on everybody that's locked up. But we make it seem like it's honorable to wear that jumpsuit. I see him come in the court strolling and like, that make you a man. Are you kidding me? They have destroyed your family, destroyed everything. Now, when you get out, you at ground zero and you 90 years old. Who are you gonna help? Nobody. What kind of job you gonna get? None. Can't vote, can't get a job. It is not cool. Yeah, and I know what time it is. You got some brothers out there that mess with you and try to insult your manhood. And they not gonna fight fair unless, box and no, they go shoot you. And we got to change their mentality. Once we do that, we can deal with these racist people that stormed the White House. But as long as we're fighting each other, it ain't gonna happen.
That there are many points. See, it's a fracture. It's a terrible fracture in us as human beings. And one of the reasons we have this terrible fracture is racism. And it's the big lie, or part of the big lie. And because it's like an infection, it is, or cancer, it is deep within us, and we are unconsciously unaware of the things that we might do or say could be hurtful to each other. And that's within the African American community as well as without. So we have to start, and it's not going to be accomplished in my lifetime, but we have to start somewhere. And I think making the younger people aware of the past, admitting that, yes, we were wrong in the past. We contributed to what we have today. We laid the framework unconsciously. Some of it was conscious, some of it was unconscious, but some of it was policy, some of it was law, but it happened. So in some of it was, within our homes. Some of it was without. But it is a huge splintered problem. And we're not, in most of our lifetimes, we can become closer and we can all have a common goal. But how we get there is a different story. And whether we're going to come, you said African Americans come together, right? See, one thing we have to understand, African Americans as a whole suffered a lot of trauma. The trauma of racism, the trauma of enslavement, just trauma, just so much. And some of this trauma is passed on from generation to generation. Some of these policies and practices are from generation to generation. The thing we have to do is confront our demons. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard for me. And when you asked me, did I experience racism? I did, but that is not a part that I dwell on. But it was very hard. It's very hard. And but you have to talk about it. If you don't talk about it and you try to say, oh, well, we're going to pass over, that didn't happen, you're not going to get anywhere, because just like an infection that doesn't heal, we have an infection within and without. The infection is getting bigger and worse, but until someone says, we need to talk, we need to heal, we need our young people to know that they stand on the shoulders of people who paid a huge price. They paid in the denial of their fullest potential.
What advice would you give to the next generation?
There's a quote that our ancestors gave us. And they taught us not only about uh, the words and deeds, not only about how to live, but also how to heal. And they said to us, there is no greater human dynamic than to heal thyself and to also facilitate healing in others. When one heals thyself, one becomes human. When one facilitates healing in others, one becomes humane. The journey that we take from human beingness to humane beingness is a spiritual one and helps us to fulfill our lifelong African mission of doing good, bringing good into the world, and hopefully leaving no good undone. So the questions that we have to ask ourselves on a daily basis are, did you smile at someone today? Did you shake someone's hand today? Did you hug someone today? Did you employ the unemployed? Did you educate the illiterate? Did you help the unjustly incarcerated? Did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe the naked? Did you house the homeless? Did you help those who were lost find their way? Did you comfort the sick and abused? Did you inspire the uninspired? And did you tell someone that you love them today? I say, did you tell someone that you love them today? What did you do today, my brothers and sisters? To do good, bring good into the world. And at the end of the day, will someone say that you left no good undone?
Learn your history and who you are. Who you are. We've had, as a group of people, we've had a lot of trauma, both physical and mental. But the way to cure our trauma is to find out where we came from, the truth, who we are. And, stop, learn about yourself and learn about how you connect to other people. That's all. Know yourself, know thyself, know yourself, know who you are, and you will be comfortable in yourself.
Study to show yourself approved. Study, study, study. Because a study of the past propels us into the future. They say it repeats itself, but it really doesn't. But as Dr. Carr said, it has patterns, has rhythms, and you want to find the pattern and the rhythm. And the only way to do that is study, because you'll find today in yesterday. And you'll find the mistakes that we made and what people tried to do to overcome those errors. You'll be able to prepare yourself so you don't have to keep starting from the beginning, because we have been fighting for freedom ever since we got off those enslavement ships. And we have never stopped fighting. But you got to know that, so that you don't think that you're the first one to start this fight. You're not. I'm not the first one to start African-centered education. I'm not. We've been fighting to educate ourselves as soon as we stepped off the enslavement ship. So when I know that, then I can just build on what our ancestors had to do.
Don't let someone's opinion be your reality. Change it. Determine your own reality. So look at, again, who you are, because we are great people. Whose you are, who's leading and guiding you. And then you can be the best you can be in anything that you do. Because as a race, we are awesome.
Stay in school. Get your best grades that you can. And if you're struggling, in school, make sure you get help and get a good support and mentoring system. When it's time to go to college, make sure you focus on that. Apply for the grants. If most of you live in North Philadelphia, Temple University, even for the for high school students, they have programs. This way they'll know that you're there. So make sure you apply to these type of programs so you're not swimming in debt. Because I think when I went to Temple, it was $500. And, that was a long time ago. but you don't want to be swimming in debt when you could make a plan for your life now.
Study hard. Learn as much as you can. Participate in things outside of your comfort level. That's important. If you want to build your confidence, then you've got to be able to put yourself out there. Learn about your own history. Half the things that I know now, I didn't know when I was young, but I read a lot of research. You know, there are so many good history books out there now. So many authors of African descent. That's important. Pick up a book and read it.
And so what I'm going to say to you all is about legacy transfer and will be a help to you in your survival here in the United States. You must understand, I would tell this generation that you must understand white supremacy and how it works. That everything else will only confuse you. So our existence in the United States is in the context of white supremacy. That's why we're here. Otherwise, we probably still be in Africa, further developing our civilizations and our nation and our peoplehood. So I would say that. And then also say that reconnect to your ancestors, because they the one that gives you your peoplehood. And peoplehood talks about culture, politics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, or even sex, and war. Those are all of our human behaviors, young folk. See? And that's all part of our peoplehood too, those type of dynamics. And those type of dynamics are the same part of every people's lives. But we have to practice for us. They have to practice for themselves. It's all right for us to practice our peoplehood. That's what makes the world go around. That's what makes the world so universal and vast and diverse. People recognize and respect each other as they present themselves. So, so peoplehood is everything. Health, economics, I said all that. So it's important. So it's important to understand and connect to your peoplehood. And those are things I would say to our youth. And the best key that I can give to them is practice best proves whether or not you achieve what you want to achieve.
To tell me, you have to talk to yourself. What do I want to do? So if you think you want to go to school, then you have to begin to understand what that's going to take. And that takes something called a commitment, and discipline. And as I said at first, thinking about what it is you want to do. Sometimes I would tell my students, give me a good noun and give me a good adjective to describe what you want to do. What's that noun? What's that adjective? So you want to be that nurse? What kind of nurse? Ordinary nurse or an exemplary nurse? All right. So I think that you have to begin to do that hard work of studying, to hit the books, to listen in class, to contribute. However you're being instructed for you to think about that, because if you don't think you're getting what you're supposed to get, you may have to be the one to bring that to the teacher's attention, or you go to your parents to bring that to their attention. All right. And then there's got to be what happened to me. If there's something that a parent doesn't like, you got to go to the school and talk to folks about what it is you don't like. All right. What you're having a problem with or what you are finding difficult. So I think that if young people want to pursue whatever it is you want to pursue, there's got to be the groundwork, that kindergarten through grade 12, that groundwork of getting all that you can get, and the more that you have to give, and the more that you have to get. So you have to do the academics, but you have to also be sort of, as this term, well-rounded. So do the sports, do the music, do the whatever, the leadership, because for colleges sometimes, and for other things such as employment, people are going to ask you about, can you do the job, but what are those qualities that you bring? What are those personal qualities that you bring? If you're working at a job or something like that, you're going to get reviewed on the job description, did you adhere or do what the job description called for? But what were your personal qualities too? What were the personal qualities that you brought to the job? Were you a leader? Uh, did you show? How did you show leadership? Are you a team player sometimes? Excuse me. So these are some things that I would talk to young people about. What do you want to do? What are you thinking about? And what are some of the ways in which you are preparing? And the first way is that you've got to be true to yourself and talk to yourself and then do some mapping out.
To follow up what he said, you know, you will see in the schools, in the high school, many of the Asian students will get all these scholarships. But one of the things, and the researchers has proven this, Black students will not ask for help, will not get the tutoring. What they have is called Asian study gangs. It's not that they're any smarter than you, they just master the system. And they will study together. Their parents will pay for tutors. Your parents might not be able to pay it, but you're in North Philly. Make the best of North Philadelphia at Temple with the tutoring programs they have. Hopefully they still have them, but I know they did have them in the past. I know LaSalle does it. You know, I don't know of any other colleges. See, we're blessed to have so many universities in this city to help you. And then some of the high school students have service projects where they tutor young people.
You know, go forward and be great. You all have the ability to do that. You know, the obstacles, you can overcome them. It's up to you. Go forward and be great.
In the 60s, I paid my price for freedom by being a part of the civil rights movement. I protest. I was water hosed. I was tear gas and arrested. I was determined to make a difference in future generations. So today, Sankofa scholars, you can make a difference by raising your voice and proving that there is no age limit to social change. It does not matter what your zip code is. All that it matters is your determination to want to fight for equality. You are somebody. You can make a difference. And as long as I can, I will pursue fairness and freedom. I am happy I made the decision to be a part of the revolution that changed the world.
You young people are beautiful. Don't give up. Don't let society control you. Don't let the neighborhood, you know, threaten you with the guns and all of that. You gotta keep your knees ashy and you're gonna be all right.
The wisdom passed down from Baba Joe Foster when we interviewed on Inspiring Me Bob. When he started talking about college and like how he felt out of place when he wasn't like reading to the standards, it showed me like how much reading and like how books can affect your life.
Well, Brother Keith told us, he told me that he grew up in a rough neighborhood in North Philly with his mom and his dad wasn't there to help his mom. So that pushed him to do better in school and all of that. And it reminded me to never give up and stay focused on school so you can get to bigger and better things.
The elder that inspired me was Mama Sharon Whitney. When we interviewed her, she spoke about how she was really big on Black excellence, and she spoke about all her achievements, and it really inspired me because it's like I want to be like her. I want to be able to experience that. I want to be able to achieve all those things, and I want people to interview me and be inspired by me. So she inspired me.
Mine would be Baba Ari, because Baba Ari had told me, he just had like showed me how to like never give up, because Like that's what he didn't do. He just never gave up and always fulfill your dream. And don't wait for. He always told me don't. He always he told us like don't wait for it to come for you. Don't wait for it to come to you. You gotta go and get it. So yeah.
One person we interviewed that I enjoyed interviewing was Sharon. She told us to stay prayed up and keep our knees ashy. And I believe in a big part of God, and that's why I enjoy interviewing her.